When somebody famous passes away, media outlets scramble to be the first to cover the story. This often results in days to weeks of a lot of speculation. So when their autopsies are finally released, sometimes they come as a complete and utter shock. Here are 5 celebrity deaths whose autopsies came with curveballs. This man is about as legendary as it gets. Sadly, so is his death, for very different reasons. To his fans, Elvis Presley lived the kind of life that most would only dream of, but the reality was actually kinda dark. Throughout his career, his manager basically treated him like a cheap trick. He deemed it beneficial for Elvis to have a playboy persona. As a result, he arranged frequent dates and gave Elvis little choice. He also provoked him to kiss women for the cameras constantly, even when he was trying to be faithful. Towards the end of Elvis's life, he lived in near complete isolation and seemed very melancholy and lonely to the few allowed to be around. It's not exactly shocking that he struggled with addiction. Tragically, the people in his life enabled his dangerous behavior. At his death, he had 8 different substances in his system, ranging from strong painkillers to hypnotics, and all were prescribed. On August 16, 1977, he was found unresponsive on his bathroom floor. He was rushed to the hospital and pronounced dead that afternoon. His autopsy revealed 2 shocking findings. One, that he had a massive amount of dried up stool, some that was at least over 4 months old, in his colon, likely a result of his addiction. And 2, that he likely died of something a little peculiar. He suffered a fatal heart arrhythmia, most likely exacerbated by the drugs, but brought on by straining to have a bowel movement. Though his autopsy initially claimed to rule out that it was drug-related, the years of abuse most likely weakened his heart and played a role. I have no doubt that Heather O'Rourke would have become a household name, but sadly, she just didn't live long enough. Cult classic horror flick Poltergeist would have never been the same without their main character played by 5-year-old Heather O'Rourke. She was scouted by Spielberg himself while she was eating lunch with her mother. She went on to land roles in Happy Days, Webster, and of course the film's sequels. Tragically, her career came to a screeching halt just a few days after her 12th birthday. The trouble began while she was filming Poltergeist 3. She fell very ill with dizziness, nausea, and abdominal cramping. She was eventually treated for Crohn's disease with steroid injections and improved for a bit, but after celebrating her birthday, things took a dark turn. She became doubled over in agony and soon collapsed. She was rushed to the hospital but had to be revived while en route. After emergency surgery, she suffered cardiac arrest a second time, only resuscitation efforts were not successful. Turns out the real culprit was intestinal stenosis, otherwise known as a bowel blockage. It was left untreated for so long that her tissue became necrotic and died, leading to septic shock. Had it been caught early on, she could have easily been saved. Instead, she suffered greatly. Back in '93, a series of unfortunate events claimed the life of a star on the rise. Almost 2 decades later, history repeated itself. It was a fair spring day in North Carolina when a film was in production. They didn't know it yet, but it would go on to become a cult classic. The lead actor was a steal because he could perform many of his own stunts as well as act. 28-year-old Brandon Lee was filming a scene of The Crow where he walks into his apartment and is eventually shot. Everything began without a hitch. The prop gun fired and a small explosive detonated, which was all part of the plan, but instead of falling forward, Brandon ricocheted backwards. Seconds ticked by and he didn't get up. At first, people on set believed he was just horsing around, but eventually they made the harrowing discovery that he was unresponsive. There wasn't any visible blood at first, so they believed that he hit his head in the fall. He was rushed to the hospital and into the operating room, but he just didn't have enough time to be saved. His autopsy came as a giant curveball when the coroner discovered an actual bullet stuck near his spine. The weapon on set was never checked. Had it been, they would have spotted the bullet lodged inside. Something all too similar happened on the set of Alec Baldwin's film Rust in 2021. On January 23, 2021, it was announced that we lost a beloved television personality. His death didn't exactly come as a shock because the media had covered his hard struggle with COVID-19 earlier that month. I am talking about 87-year-old Larry King. When the announcement came, many people automatically assumed that he lost his battle. COVID hit him hard enough for him to be hospitalized, and as strong and stoic as he was still human and 87. Unbeknownst to the masses, he had something completely different happening within his body that would soon kick off a deadly chain reaction. King had endured several serious health conditions and some still lingered. He had battled cancer, heart disease, and diabetes, which led to issues with blood flow. When he developed an infection, it was likely hard to spot, especially with recovering from a virus. That infection spread and became systemic. At his death, he succumbed to sepsis. He also had severely congested failing kidneys and hypoxic respiratory failure. This means that his blood did not contain enough oxygen. It's unclear whether the sepsis caused this or his other health issues. In the end, he beat COVID-19, but it's heartbreaking that the victory didn't last long. There is still one big unanswered question surrounding the death of this beloved TV actor and comedian. In January of last year, authorities found a bewildering scene inside of a room at the Ritz-Carlton, Orlando. A 65-year-old man was found tucked in the bed with bilateral paraorbital ecchymosis, which in short means 2 black eyes. It was the body of Bob Saget. Of course, police followed protocol for possible foul play, but at face value, they really couldn't tell what they were dealing with. An autopsy report unearthed answers that presented more questions. His examination revealed serious head trauma. This trauma was sustained to the back of his head, and it was so great that it resulted in fractures surrounding his eye sockets and base of skull. He also had counter-coup contusions of the brain, which happens when a hard hit basically causes the brain to ricochet off of the skull. Additionally, there was hemorrhaging between his brain and tissue that lines the brain. The only other clues were a positive COVID test, heart disease, and the fact that he appeared to tuck himself into bed. The investigation didn't uncover any evidence of foul play or forced entry. He wasn't under the influence. It was clearly accidental. The question still remains, how did he sustain the fatal head trauma? Unfortunately, we will likely never know for sure.